Hey, welcome everybody. Thank you so much
Hello.
for joining us this evening. We are so excited to be joined by, already we're over 300 and we're expecting many more participants to be joining us. So we're so excited to be joined by all of you to talk to Senate Minority Leader, Senator Chuck Schumer. We're gonna be talking about our transit crisis and how New York City and the entire region can recover. My name is Sara Lin. I'm a member of the Riders Alliance. We're a grassroots organization of subway and bus riders fighting to make public transit more affordable and reliable. We're one of the organizations who worked to put this event together. I want to recognize and thank our partner organizations as well. Families for Safe Streets, New York League of Conservation Voters, New York Lawyers for Public Interest, the Strap Hangers Campaign, Permanent Citizens Advisory Committee to the MTA, the Regional Plan Association, Reinvent Albany, Transportation Alternatives, Tri-State Transportation Campaign, and Vision Long Island. This conversation is being broadcast on Facebook Live, and we have hundreds of folks tuning in and ready to be in conversation with our senator. We also have real-time transcription available. The link to real-time transcriptions in your email and in the Q&A box. So before COVID-19 hit, we knew that our transit system was failing New Yorkers. Subway and bus service was notoriously unreliable. Metro North and Long Island Railroad were known to experience catastrophic delays, and paratransit riders had no choice but to wait for hours to get around the city. And now, as a result of the pandemic, we've seen our transit system fall into an unprecedented crisis. We know the only way for subway and bus riders to recover from this pandemic is with emergency federal funding. Without it, our public transit system could see unprecedented service cuts, extreme fare hikes to $9 a ride, and more. As riders and commuters, we know you're thinking about what the future of public transit looks like, and we hope that's why you joined us tonight. We've received dozens of questions from riders across the city about immediate and long-term funding for public transit, maintaining the health and safety of riders, prioritizing accessibility, street safety, and the overall economic recovery of New York. So we're excited to have this important conversation with US Senator Schumer, who was instrumental in delivering $3.9 billion in federal funding for our subways and buses in the CARES Act. And as Senate Minority Leader, Senator Schumer is one of the most powerful elected leaders in the country. This is how he was able to deliver emergency federal funding for public transit in the CARES Act, and why he has a vital role in New York getting the $3.9 billion in emergency funding the MTA needs. So before we jump into tonight's discussion, I'll explain the format. Tonight will be a conversation-style discussion with riders and transit advocacy partners asking questions on topics ranging from subways and buses, accessibility, infrastructure, and suburban ridership. So thank you all for submitting your questions for Senator Schumer. The questions and topics you emailed about are incorporated into tonight's discussion. And just one more note, the chat box has been disabled. So if you have questions or comments, you can submit them in the Q&A box. And if you're dialing in, you can email your comments or questions to info@ridersny.org. And we'll be reading any questions that come through the Q&A box and the email. So thank you again for joining us tonight. And I'm happy now to turn it over to Betsy Plum, the Executive Director of the Riders Alliance.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you to our partners, my fellow participants, the hundreds of individuals who have tuned in tonight for our transit talk with Senator Schumer. My name is Betsy Plum, and I'm the Executive Director of the Riders Alliance. We are so glad to have the Senator with us tonight. He is, as Sarah mentioned, of course, the Minority Leader of the United States Senate. He is New York's senior senator. He's a Brooklynite, and as we saw at the beginning of the presentation, in the picture of the senator riding the 6 train, he's a rider. Senator Schumer, thank you for joining us tonight. I want to dive right in. Public transit is the lifeblood of our city, and throughout the COVID-19 crisis, it has continued to deploy more than 1 million New Yorkers to their essential jobs on the front lines every single day. To do this has cost the MTA upwards of $1 billion every month. As we look towards recovery, we know that our city won't recover without public transit, and that your role in ensuring our system has the support and investment it needs is critical. But it isn't just our city or region that needs your support. Public transit buttresses the entire country's economy, and there are national benefits enjoyed by workers and businesses across the country. As our coalition partner and one of the hosts of tonight, Reinvent Albany, demonstrated in a report just this week, the MTA alone created 100,000 jobs worth $8 billion in 47 of the 50 states over the past 8 years. We hope this helps your colleagues across the nation understand the urgency of this issue. And it's why we're excited to talk to you about transit, recovery, and our future tonight. We have members and partners who will be asking questions, and we'll get to that portion of our program shortly. But I want to start by thanking you again for ensuring the MTA received $3.9 billion out of the CARES Act. And I'd love if you could start by sharing with us why the CARES Act was so important for the MTA and your expectations around ensuring the MTA is able to receive additional transit aid in the next stimulus package.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Plum, and thank you all of the advocates who work so hard for mass transit. Thank you for everyone, the hundreds and hundreds of people who are here because you care about our subways, our buses, and our mass transit. I've been a mass transit advocate since the get-go. Transit was part of my life. My fondest memories when I was a little boy, I lived in Brooklyn in the Sheepshead Bay section, and I was a Yankee fan. And we didn't have much money. My father was an exterminator. He never went to college. And on a special day, my mom would give me, I was like 8, 9 years old, a bag lunch, 15 cents for the subway one way, 15 cents for the subway the other way, and 35 cents to get into the bleachers of Yankee Stadium. And I would get on what was then the D train. Now it's the Q. They switched the letters a few years ago. But it's the one that's called the Brighton line. It's the one that goes all the way from Brighton Beach and Coney Island up to the Bronx. And you get on, I get on at the Kings Highway stop in southern Brooklyn, and I get on the train and get off at Jerome Avenue and watch a Yankee game. And those are some fond memories. And it was safe and efficient and affordable, even for a family like ours. So I have great memories of the subway system, even on my own, 8, 9, 10 years old, as a little boy. And I've been that way ever since. We use the subways all the time. My wife, my daughters, and myself, my son-in-law and my daughter-in-law. And it's great. We love it. So I fight very, very hard for mass transit, both in getting the formulas correct, so New York and mass transit get its money. The big boys in the highway lobby always like to take our money away, but we have fought very hard and we keep it at a high percent. I want to make a commercial here. If I get to be majority leader, the percentage mass transit of highway money is going to go up because it's so important. And I've done a lot of things on transit. I'm going to list a few. They're sort of interesting. You know the number 7 line that now goes all the way to the west side? It used to stop at 42nd Street. I proposed that when I became a senator and forced the city to build it. So that was a good thing. When 9/11 happened, I made sure that the 9/11 relief fund, $20 billion, which I got President Bush to offer the city, repaired the destroyed lines. The 1 and 9 were really bad. The Cortlandt Street station was decimated. We created the Rector Connector, and we even created the Fulton Transit Hub, which you use. When Superstorm Sandy, I was able to write the bill. We made mass transit a really high priority and got billions of dollars to make the subway system and the Long Island Railroad, you know, which was also damaged out there on Long Island, to not only rebuild, but to be resilient future. And that was really good. Now we're fighting for a couple of things. Gateway. There's only one tunnel under the Hudson River. And if that tunnel were to collapse, the whole economy, as you said, Betsy, of the country would collapse. We're 10% of the population, New York metropolitan area. You go from Boston to Washington, it's 25%. And we depend on mass transit going under those tunnels. And we've gotten the money for Gateway. It's in the budget, but Mr. Donald Trump, I won't use the Brooklyn words that I use in private about him with hundreds of people on the phone. He has blocked it. He's sitting on it. We've also gotten money for Moynihan Station to make Moynihan Station better. Nope, not doing it. Staten Island Ferry, very important to keep funding that. And one of the things I am really excited about is turning all of our bus system electric, making it clean and green. And that's one of our goals, and we put some money in budgets to do it, but we have to do more. I also, incidentally, have a clean cars proposal where you turn in your internal combustion engine and get a big rebate and get an electric car, And by 2040, under our proposal, there would not be one internal combustion engine on the road. So that's a good thing. So there are a lot of things we've been doing on mass transit. And as you said, I was eyeball to eyeball with Secretary Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary. He's Trump's guy. He didn't want to put any money for mass transit in the CARES bill. I said, then you're not getting a bill. And here's an article. I'm going to hold this up from the Daily News. It's backwards. It says, 4 billion in 8 MTA, I'm reading backwards here, relief at center of coronavirus fight. That's basically what it says. And it shows that I told Mnuchin, no way, baby, and we got it. And we have to get the same, somebody said, either Betsy or Sarah or somebody said it loses, the transit system loses $1 billion a month now because not as many people are riding. I was on the subway Sunday again. It's clean, it's good, it's fine. You gotta wear gloves, you gotta keep your social distancing, but you can use the subways. And I did, here I am. And everyone should be encouraged. I don't think I have to encourage the people on this call to do it, but encourage your friends and neighbors to do it. My wife does, she takes the subway into the city and she's here, right here, behind. So you can do it and we should get back to it. So there's a lot to do. And I just want to say a few other things. To get the CARES bill, to get the COVID-4 bill, which I wrote the formula with Nancy Pelosi and Nita Lowey, you know, she's the head of the Appropriations Committee in the House. We wrote the formula so that, again, what they try to do, even in mass transit, is take the money away from New York. But we did this on a ridership basis. And so if this bill passes, the HEROES Act, it would have a lot of things. It would have more money for small business, more money for hospitals, more money for nonprofits. It would extend unemployment insurance to December 31st. It now expires July 31st. It has, I put this in, hazard pay. All these people are on the front lines. Guess who are among the people on the front lines who would get hazard pay in our proposal? Bus drivers, subway workers, conductors on the subway. So this is all in the bill, and I need your help to pass it. And I'm going to do this if you don't mind, Betsy. We need heat on our Republican senators. The Democrats, every one of us, but we're in the minority in the Senate. When you're in the minority, the Republicans run the show. You've all heard of Mitch McConnell. Do you want to do a virtual boo? The guy who said, let the cities go bankrupt. So he can put whatever he wants on the floor. Our only power is to block it. Like, for instance, we just put together Senators Kamala Harris, Senator Booker, myself, and the Black Caucus, a really strong bill on justice, on racial justice. It's called the Justice in Policing Act. It's going to pass the House. McConnell won't put it on the floor. He's putting on his own proposal, which does nada. That's the power of the majority leader. But we can hold things up. And we will hold up the CARES bill if we don't get it. But here's how you can help us. Can I do this, Betsy, with your indulgence? There are 21 Republican senators who are key. And you got to call them and say, we need the HEROES bill and we need the mass transit in it. And you don't have to call your two senators. I'm for it. Senator Gillibrand, who's my pal, is for it. But I'll bet everyone here has friends from other states. Everyone here has family in other states. I'm going to read you, with your indulgence, and I'll send every group here the list, and you send it out to your membership. If you know someone in Florida or in Georgia or in Ohio, just get them to email, to tweet, to call their senator, whatever, write, however they want to do it. And we will, and we can put the heat on them. And let me just go over the names, okay? Can I do that before we get to the Q&A?
I would love, if possible, we can share the names afterwards, but I want to get to some of our questions. Would that be okay? We're ready to fight with you, though. And
okay. So
we're excited to get to those
list. Call someone you know in one of these states and get them to call their senator, because that's the fight we're making. We got to get them to put the HEROES bill on the floor. Okay?
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Senator.
Can I say one other thing?
Yes.
Just because it's good news. It's such bad times, and we see so many horrible things, whether it's the lack of health care, whether it's the murder of African people of color by the police, whether it's the economy with so many people unemployed. But the Supreme Court, which I usually dislike, did two very good things this week. On Monday, they said you can't discriminate against LGBTQ people, right? Very important. My daughter and her wife were very happy about that. And then on Thursday, today, they said the DACA kids could get this burden off their shoulder and can't be deported. So at least some good news amidst the gloom and trouble. And now, Betsy, get to your questions.
Absolutely. We are energized by those incredible victories, and we are really grateful for your advocacy on our behalf over the years, thinking about access, resiliency, sustainability, and what you noticed and noted at the front of your talk, Senator, is the way that transit is soaked into our existence as New Yorkers. So millions of riders are counting on you. We're ready to fight with you. We'll get to that list of folks that we need to be targeting, but I'm excited to kick off the conversation. We know that essential workers have carried New York City and our country through this crisis, and we need to make sure that our recovery doesn't include the types of service cuts and fare hikes that would hurt essential riders the most. And so I want to turn to a Riders Alliance member, an essential worker from Queens, Suki Wong, for our first question. Suki?
Thank you, Betsy.
Hi, Sue.
Hi, Senator Schumer. So I want to first off, thank Senator Schumer for taking the time out to join us this evening. And I also want to thank Stephanie from Riders Alliance for giving me the opportunity to speak here tonight. So my name is Suki Wong. I'm a pharmacist at NYU Langone Orthopedic Hospital. I and many of my coworkers are riding the buses and trains to get to and from work during this time, during this unprecedented time. The service reductions have personally added more time to my travel, but I have no choice as mass transit is still the most reliable and affordable way to get around the city. During this pandemic shutdown, I have witnessed a decrease in ridership in my daily commute. The reported 90% MTA ridership reduction caused tremendous fare revenue loss. So as an essential worker, I fear that this will cause subway and bus line elimination and unpredictable wait time for trains as service is slashed. So for New Yorkers like me and all New Yorkers who depend on all of the essential workers, the MTA transit system is indeed a necessary lifeline. Senator Schumer, I'm here to ask you, how committed are you and what will you do to ensure that the MTA will get this additional $3.9 billion in the HEROES Act to help keep millions of us New Yorkers moving in the city? Thank you.
Suki, if we are to cut back on service, if we are to raise the fares, New York's economy will take much, much longer to recuperate from this awful virus. Transit is our economic engine. 3.5 million people go on and off Manhattan Island every day. That's amazing. And that is why, in my opinion, by the way, New York has the vitality that no other city has, because we have this amazing mass transit system that brings us all together. And I love riding the subways because they're New York. They're diverse. You see everybody. My daughter took the subway to high school and she wrote an essay, her subway car classroom, and how she observed people and how she learned so much from watching. So we have no choice but to get this money, because it will be like telling your heart to stop beating if you're a person, New York City being a person, subway system being our heart and our veins and our arteries and all that. And so we had big success last time. The Senate minority, the Democrats, we have the power to block the bills so they can't go forward. So let's say Trump wants something, or let's say the Republicans want something, or other people want something. We can say, if we stick together as a 47-member caucus, we're not moving forward unless the money is in there. That's what worked last time, and I believe it will work again. You have my total commitment. This was one of my very highest priorities in the last bill, and it remains one of my very highest priorities here. In addition,
Thank you.
Yeah. In addition, I would just say this. Also in the bill, which relates to you, is HEROES pay. Frontline workers get HEROES pay. You would, subway riders, would $13 more an hour if you've served on the front lines, in addition to your salary, to help people pay. And that's going to help a lot of our bus drivers and subway drivers. I've talked to them. You know how many were lost. A whole lot were lost. I just spoke to the head of Local 100. He told me the new number. I think it was like 78 and 80 or some high, horrible number. But a lot of them need help to even get to the buses and trains because they can't as easily as they used to drive them. So they need help too. But my commitment is total.
Thank you, Senator.
Not 90%, not 99.
Thank you. I want to move, and thank you, Suki. I want to move to another key constituency in our city, students. We'll hear from Nova Aftab from the NYPIRG Strap-Hangers campaign. The Strap-Hangers campaign organizes CUNY students on campuses citywide. We know that CUNY and its students represent New York at its most public-spirited and aspirational, and I'm really excited to have Nova here tonight. Nova?
Hello, Senator Schumer. Thank you so
Hi,
much
Nova.
for joining us. My question is, earning a college degree has become increasingly unaffordable. The cost of college doesn't include tuition, but also includes paying for housing, childcare, textbooks, and of course, public transportation.
Yeah.
In New York City, public transportation is an extension of our higher education system, as many students, especially CUNY students, depend on transit to get to class. Due to COVID-19's impact on the MTA's budget, students are scared that fares will increase, meaning that many students will be unable to afford to get to class in the future. What can the federal government do to ensure that public transportation stays affordable for students like me?
Thank you for your question. And so I asked the MTA, how much money do you need to make sure two things happen? A, you don't have to lay off any workers or cut back service. And B, you don't raise your fare. And they said $4 billion in this next COVID. So that's the amount we've put the formula for. And it's similar to the answer to Suki. We got to get it passed. It passed the House already. But McConnell, that's why I gave the names, to Betsy, of the 21 senators. McConnell is debating whether to put it on the floor. And if he doesn't put it on the floor, we got big trouble. So these senators have got to feel the heat and go to McConnell and say, put the damn bill on the floor or I'm going to lose my election. And that will help. But there is no question, students depend on the subway. Students depend on buses. I know, I spend a lot of time at the CUNY campuses. I just spoke virtually to about 20 CUNY graduations. I usually go in person, but obviously that's not happening, but they did virtual graduations. And I know without transit, you can't get to school. So we have to get it done, and putting heat on these people will get it done. And we don't want to get it done halfway. So the fare goes up or the service is cut back. We're also, by the way, trying in this bill to get a reduction in student loans if you have to remove some of the burden. I'd like to see all student loans forgiven by the federal government. That's not going to happen in this bill, but it's a goal of mine because this burden that your generation has is unfathomable.
Thank you, Senator. We have 5 more questions. We have received dozens of questions and we have condensed them into 5. So we are going to try our best to get through all of them. And I want to turn next to something we were talking about in terms of the consequences, why this money is so important. We know that public transit is the lifeblood of the city, the circulatory system of the region's economy. For a century, the Regional Plan Association has sought to enhance access to the city, and we have Lauren Subayama, their Director of Communications, to ask you a question about some of the consequences that we're facing.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Betsy, and Riders Alliance for hosting today's conversation, and thank you, Senator Schumer. You sort of just touched upon this, but New York City is a major economic engine for the regional and national economy. And at a time when the region faces a deep recession and the future viability of the transit system is at risk, there really aren't any good options for cutting costs or replacing lost passenger revenues. Our research, which we released last month, shows that mass transit is essential to New York City's economic recovery, but without federal aid, a base subway fare could skyrocket to $9 a ride. And at a time when New Yorkers have lost so much income and are unemployed, can you assure us that the Senate Democrats will hold the line to prevent MTA fare hikes?
Well, we can't force them to present fare hikes, but we can give them enough money so that they can't do fare hikes. And if they do, they'll be lying. They've told us if they get this $4 billion, they will not have to do fare hikes. We cannot have a fare hike. We just can't. And it will be very difficult for everyone. And I know the Regional Plan Association does great work on this area and has worked with me. Whenever I've wanted to expand subway lines, they've helped. And we got money for the 2nd Avenue subway to go up to 96th Street. It's supposed to go to 125th and down. As I said, they helped me when I first proposed building the number 7 line over to the west side. And I'd like to see transit extended to the transit deserts of New York, Southeast Brooklyn, a lot of Queens, West, Eastern and Southern Queens, and even in the Bronx, which has a lot of subway lines, they're all vertical. So you can't go east-west. There should be a line there. That would be eventually a dream. We shouldn't stop building our mass transit. And it's very important to do. But job number 1 is to make sure the fare does not go up.
Thank you.
Can I say one other thing, Betsy? So
Yeah.
also in the CARE bill, also in the CARES bill is $57 billion in state and local aid. 34 billion to New York City, 68 billion. 34 to New York City, no, sorry, 34 billion to New York State, 17 to New York City, 17 billion to the other localities. That's in addition to the mass transit money. If we get that, the state and city will have a lot of money that they can continue to put into the subway and bus system, both here in New York City and on Long Island and Westchester and across the river to New Jersey.
Great. Well, we have 4 more questions. An area where we have received a number of audience questions is accessibility. New York Lawyers for the Public Interest organizes users of the MTA's notorious Access-a-Ride program, and we're grateful to have Iman Ramawi here. She is an organizer with NILPI. Iman?
Hi, thank you so much, Senator Schumer, for joining us, and thank you, Betsy. Without additional MTA federal funding, many transit programs that serve people with disabilities, the elderly, and others with mobility impairments will be at risk. Programs at risk include planned elevator installations throughout a subway system, which is currently only less than 25% accessible, long overdue reforms to Access-a-Ride paratransit services, such as the provisions for on-demand service, the half-price fares New York City program, which is currently offered to to the subways and bus riders, and will be extended to Access-a-Ride users next month, and even the facilitation of reasonable accommodation requests for the MTA's own workers with disabilities. And I use Access-a-Ride every day. I'm a double amputee, so I know all about it. Will you support transit riders with disabilities, the elderly, and others with mobility impairments by supporting this request for federal funding?
Yes, and we have written in, I was one of the original authors of the ADA, the Americans for Disabilities Act, which is the first foundation that we couldn't discriminate against people with disabilities. It's not related to transit, but there's a kid living next door to me in my apartment across the hall who had cerebral palsy, and he had a wheelchair, you know, it was a motorized wheelchair. And, you know, when he was 10 or 11, I asked his father, why don't you let him go out and explore? She said he can't because there's no curb cuts. Simple thing like curb cuts. So he was prisoner to his block. And I helped write the law and push New York City so that now any new sidewalk that's built has curb cuts, and most of them do. And so it's the same thing for transit. If you're disabled, and we want all our people who have disabilities to be part of the economy, part of the life of New York City. And if you can't have access to the subway system or to buses, making them accessible, you can't really participate in the whole life and lifeblood of our city. So we have written in the bills, not in this because it's not capital construction, but in all the capital construction bills that they have to do more for the disabled. The MTA's capital plan, we push them, requires making 70 more stations accessible. I don't know which ones they are. I had the list in front of me, but I don't have it here. And we have to do that. A different area than this immediate COVID money is just to get a larger increase in both operating subsidies and capital construction for mass transit in our federal budget. That'll happen in September. And you know, let me just say, COVID has shown a lot of the weaknesses in our society. For instance, why do people of color Why do more of them die, and why do the more get COVID? Because they have lousy health care. You know, if you're in the suburbs and you have a pre-existing condition, it will probably be taken care of. If you're in the inner city, it won't. Well, similarly, what it's shown is how important mass transit is, because people need it and can't get anywhere without it. And when you don't have it, I'll give you one little story. I like to tell stories, Betsy. Is that okay? She's moving
We
me
can get to our other 3 questions. You can tell your story.
We'll get to you.
I'll make a deal.
Okay. So I met a guy online who's a home health care worker, recto. He's probably undocumented. He's an immigrant, but I didn't ask him. And he's a home health care worker. He took care of 2 elderly adults. Every day he'd get on the bus in the Bronx and go and take care of them. Then the bus was temporarily canceled. Recto was fit to be tied. He cared about these 2 people. He gets paid next to nothing. We got to raise the wages of home health care workers, but nonetheless. And he would pay for a taxi every day to go back and forth. So that's why we need to get the heroes pay. But that showed how important mass transit was. Recto would basically have to stop doing that after a few months if we didn't get him help. And those 2 elderly people, they'd have no support. They probably wouldn't survive. So COVID has highlighted anew the weaknesses in our society, and one of them is not giving enough support to mass transit. It shows how much we need it.
Absolutely. And I think you touch on something. Transit is important to so many other issues and vice versa. And few movements have caught as quickly as the demand for safe streets. Reducing urban driving and its inherent dangers depends on a robust public transit system. And so we have Amy Cohen from Families for Safe Streets to ask a question on this.
I know Amy. She's from my neighborhood, and I feel for her loss. Every time I pass by 3rd Street, I think of you.
Thank you. Well, as you know, 6 years ago, my street was a speedway and a reckless driver killed my 12-year-old son, Sammy, in front of my home. And as you pointed out, it's just a few blocks from yours. Given the cuts to transit and fear of packed trains, people are already starting to drive. And once New York City opens up more, it's only going to get worse. We need Congress to rescue our transit system and invest in safe ways to get around by biking and walking so that the city isn't overrun with cars. You stood next to me just a few months ago on the World Day of Remembrance for traffic crash victims. And as we stood side by side in front of 100 body bags representing the lives lost on our roadways every single day, you committed to an infrastructure investment for New York to make our streets safer. Will you personally ensure that that more people do not die on our streets like my son? Yes.
And by the way, everybody, she's done an amazing job pushing the city to do much more in terms of making the streets safe and preventing the unnecessary deaths of young people, pedestrians. I'm a bicyclist. I bicycle on Saturdays all over the city. I'm not a spandex guy. I don't go fast. You know, I just like to watch and look around. But I know exactly what you mean. And yes, I commit to doing everything we can to build a robust transit system so there are fewer cars on the street and the streets are safer.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you, Amy. Senator,
You can call me Chuck. You can call me.
So Chuck, the MTA serves areas far beyond New York City. We've mentioned suburban riders a few times, and it moves 40% of the nation's riders. Its permanent Citizens Advisory Committee is a voice for riders from Montauk, and that's a note to the folks who have written into the chat saying they don't want us to forget Suffolk County. So it moves riders from Montauk to Poughkeepsie. We have Lisa Daglian, their executive director, with us tonight. Lisa?
Hi, thank you so much, and thank you, Senator. Thank you, Senator Chuck, for joining us and for responding to our questions on these really important topics, and to Riders Alliance and all of our other co-hosts. Pre-COVID, on-time performance for subways, the Long Island Railroad, and Metro North were heading in the right direction, and commuters were regaining confidence in the system. Millions of daily riders were looking forward to station improvements, accessibility projects, new train cars and signals, and a host of other improvements to make their daily ride better and to increase capacity, which is more important than ever. Even though we're coming back slowly, we are coming back. we need federal funding like the HEROES Act. And we also need congestion pricing. Approvals that we're still waiting, that the MTA is still waiting for in New York City from US DOT. How can riders and commuters be confident that improvements will continue and important projects move forward? And how can you help us move forward the approvals process and congestion pricing? Thank you.
Well, thank you. And first, I don't know if people knew you, Mark Epstein, who was a great advocate for Long Island Railroad riders, passed away this week at the young age of 55. He used to work with me to try and improve the Long Island Railroad, as you know, Lisa.
Yeah,
and he was a
tragic
guy
loss.
who really cared, and we miss him very, very much.
Thank you.
Our commuter rails are extremely important as well. I've pushed very hard for lots of things on the commuter rails, for the third track to go forward out to Ronkonkoma and Sandy. We redid a lot of the Long Island Railroad things, and I got $1 billion for the MTA to put in PTC, positive train control. This is important on the New York City subway system and on the commuter rails. It uses satellites and high frequency. If something is on the tracks, and this is, you know, in New York City, but more particularly on Long Island and Westchester, you've seen Spite and Dival and all the other horrible accidents we've had. PTC stops the train automatically and saves lives and makes it much safer. And I pushed the MTA to make sure PTC is established on Metro North, on the Long Island Railroad, and in the New York City subways. So we have to do this, and we have to be very, very mindful of our commuter rail system. I keep pushing for money for these things in the regular, in the regular appropriations bill, and I'll continue to do that. I also, this is a partnership with New Jersey. It's not New York, but PATH needs help too. And we got them in the Sandy bill, we got them about 1.2 billion, and we got Amtrak $1 billion, so they could keep going as well, because they're also part of the lifeblood of New York. But our commuter rails are extremely important, and I always look out for them.
Thank you, Senator. Our final question, we've made it. And this again speaks to many of our audience questions that we've received in advance of the event and tonight. The Tri-State Transportation Campaign spoke with a range of experts about best practices for reopening transit as we recover from COVID, and all of its informants pointed to important measures that cost money, adding to the financial burden of the pandemic on the MTA. So I'll invite Nick Cifuentes, their executive director, to ask our final question.
Thank you, Betsy. Hi, thank you, Senator, for being here tonight. So we recently released a report that looked at mitigations for our subway system and our buses and our trains. And one thing that we noted in the report was that public transit systems in other cities around the world have invested in capital projects to protect their systems from pandemics, especially systems in Asia that experienced SARS. Now, the MTA and other agencies will need to make similar improvements to safeguard transit, but many of these capital improvements are pretty costly. What role can the federal government play to ensure agencies can protect our nation's trains and buses from this and also future pandemics?
Well, that's a great question, and I love doing things like this because I often learn. Now, you're right. To protect from future pandemics is something we're going to have to do. We're going to have to do it in a lot of different ways in the future. And one of the ways is mass transit. And Nick, I would be happy to try and get some language in the next appropriations bill. CARES bill is already written, to see that we could put some money aside for that. So if you and your group want to contact the folks in my office and give us some suggestions, I'll try to work to get those in legislation. That's a very excellent idea. We have to prepare for future pandemics in mass transit and healthcare in so many ways, because they're going to, now that the globe is becoming smaller, if you will, it's going to be more frequent and more deadly. So we have to prepare. We were unprepared. Donald Trump, excuse me, he's not my favorite, when he said, don't worry about it, when he said it'll go away in a while, when he said it's a hoax, we were unprepared this time. We cannot let that happen again, no matter who's president. Hopefully he won't be soon. But putting money in the legislative process in the mass transit, a separate section, so they don't take it out of capital construction for the handicapped or for new subways or for maintenance of the existing, is a very good idea, and I look forward to working with you and your group.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator. I want to circle quickly back to one piece of Lisa's question around congestion pricing. It is currently being held up, and certainly we absolutely need the $3.9 billion that we're talking about. But much of what we're also discussing gets to capital investments, and the MTA needs the money that was going to be raised by congestion pricing. What can you do in your role to ensure that the US DOT moves forward the appropriate?
They're sitting on it. I don't know, I guess you know this.
Yes.
New York City has submitted its congestion pricing plan. It needs approval by the federal government, and the Secretary of Transportation, Elaine Chao, is sitting on it like she's sitting on gateway money and many other things. I try to push her. She's McConnell's wife, by the way. So not that I cast aspersions on the spouse, but she's doing a very bad job in terms of protecting mass transit. Probably because she listens to Trump and the people in the White House. But we just got to keep pressuring her. And I would recommend all the groups here constantly call her office, write her office, email her office, and say, what's going on with congestion pricing? New York City has a plan. It's sitting on your desk. There's no reason they shouldn't approve it right away.
Would you be supportive of legislation that would allow it to move forward?
Yes, I would be, although I think it would be, if we could, probably making sure she's not transportation secretary after November is probably the quickest way to do it.
Well, thank you, Senator. We really appreciate that. I want to thank you for this conversation tonight, which has been as much about how we fight to ensure New York's transit system does more than just survive this crisis, but truly thrives and carries us more equitably, sustainably, and safely into the future. But if we don't see that $3.9 billion investment that we've been discussing, we lose our route to that better future, and we desperately imperil one of our greatest and most important public goods, public transit. If we are going to recover, and if we're going to recover equitably, we cannot slip backwards. So we leave you with how important your role is for all of us here tonight, for the city, for the region, for the country, as we discussed. We need you to continue to prioritize the over 9 million New Yorkers who rely on subways, on buses, on paratransit, on commuter rail, on the jobs and contracts of the MTA to ensure that the MTA receives at least $3.9 billion in the next stimulus package. And I just want to say we need everyone on this call tonight with us here to join our movement to fight for the world-class public transit system that we don't just need, but that we all deserve. We have a transformational opportunity ahead of us to build together, but we also have a tremendous amount of work. And Senator, I'll note that includes calling the 21 senators that you're going to share with us. And so I want to join.
Explain this,
yes.
Betsy. If he doesn't put the bill on the floor, then we have no way to fight for it. So they just got to put the heroes bill on the floor. Then I can use my clout to make sure that our $3.9 billion is included. He has not made a commitment to put it on the floor. So please call those 21, have people in those states that you might have a relationship with, call those senators.
Yes, well, we're absolutely hitting the pavement on this, making our calls, and we know how important it is to get this bill moved to a vote in the Senate. And so I want to invite everyone who's tuned in tonight, if you're already not a part of our movement, if you're not a part of our fight, please text RESCUE to 52886. Again, that is RESCUE to 52886. I want to say thank you again to the Senator, to our panelists and partners, and to everyone for tuning in. We're grateful to be fighting together. We'll see you again soon. Thank you, Senator Schumer. Thank you.
Thank you. Stay healthy, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.